Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a first look at a brand new Mega Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Mega PINSIR. Mega PINSIR is a bug and flying type Pokemon with the moveset of Fury Cutter, X Scissor, and your choice of Superpower or Close Combat. Mega PINSIR is definitely a glass cannon, meaning it can deal massive damage, but it is very frail. I tested it out in some level 40 Mega Masters practice battles with members of my Discord to see how it performs in case that format returns. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Mega PINSIR in action in the Mega Master League. Hopping into the first match, letting Mega PINSIR into Excadrill. This is a very difficult matchup, as I can one-shot them with a superpower, but they can one-shot me with a Rock Slide. They fire off the Rock Slide, grabbing an early shield. I'm farming up with the PINSIR, and I decide to go for an X Scissor bait. If I'm able to successfully bait here, which I am, I can now outpace them by one turn to the Superpower. Superpower is going to grab a shield from the Exca, farming up, and they're going for Rock Slide number 2. I will, of course, commit the shield, as this would easily one-shot. Farm it up with the PINSIR. Opponent goes for the Superpower catch onto Mewtwo, but Mewtwo is about to have a very bad day. Mega PINSIR, X Scissor number 1, and X Scissor number 2. This is going to be taking care of the Mewtwo. I am very debuffed, so if they send in the Exca, I'm going to need to pivot out of here. My opponent is going to wait their clock. They send in the Exca, and I'm going to pivot into my Zacian. My Zacian is not running Close Combat, which is a bit unfortunate for this matchup, but regardless, I'm trying to save the PINSIR for later in the game. My opponent does make it to the back-to-back drill runs. I should barely be able to survive this. I go for the Play Rough, and my opponent switches into Dialga. Dialga will be able to absorb the neutral Play Rough and get the farm down. But now I can send back in Mega PINSIR. PINSIR farming up energy, going for the Superpower just before they make it to the Iron Head. Superpower is going to be lethal. Goodbye, Dialga. Back in comes the Exca. Excadrill cannot make a move. Who even needs a Reshiram? Mega PINSIR takes down the Excadrill, and that is a good game. We see a neutral lead in the next match, Mega PINSIR into Shadow Metagross. My opponent is going to stay in this matchup to start, and then save switch into Dragonite. Dragonite, I do have a very hard check for in the back, so I actually decided to do something a bit unusual. I'm going to stay in with Mega PINSIR, farm up a massive amount of energy, and then send in Zacian. Mega PINSIR's energy, if I'm not going up against the flying type, can do pretty well against most things, so in this case, I'm just going to bank a ton of energy on the PINSIR and rely on that being very useful in the endgame. I'm going to fire off the Play Rough here. Play Rough is going to connect, and down goes Dragonite. My opponent, odds are they're probably sending back in the Shadow Metagross, and these bullet punches are going to hurt. Farming up with the Zacian, going for the Wild Charge. This will not quite KO, but it will get them low. Zacian able to make it to Wild Charge number 2. This will be lethal. Opponent commits the shield. They can leave with energy, but Mega PINSIR wins CMP. So I send in Mega PINSIR. They end up going for the extra bullet punch. I fire off the X Scissor. That will KO. In the back, my opponent has Mega Charizard X. Mega Charizard X, a fire and dragon type Pokemon, takes big damage from the Superpower, and I can just send in the Reshiram to farm down. Mega PINSIR is so glassy, but if it can land a charge move, this thing hits incredibly hard, as Reshiram gets the win. We see a slightly negative lead in the next match, Mega PINSIR into Palkia. Those Dragon Tails are shredding through PINSIR, so I will save switch into my Zacian. My opponent sends in a Shadow Ho-Oh, and this is why we have Wild Charge, as Wild Charge will hit for massive damage onto the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh farming up, trying to make it to a charge move, but not before I make it to another Wild Charge. That's going to grab a shield. My defense is so debuffed, these Incinerates are tearing through the Zacian. I decide to let this go. What I should do here is just farm down with the Reshiram, but for some reason I decide to try and Fury Cutter down with the PINSIR, fire off the X Scissor here just to get rid of it when I realize I've made a mistake. My opponent commits the final shield, and they're going to be able to get a shield back from the PINSIR. This is what I get for battling in the evening. Definitely not a great play by me. I should have just farmed down with the Reshiram. Back in comes Palkia. Palkia did leave with quite a lot of energy. I want to preserve my PINSIR, so I will commit the shield and go for the Superpower. Superpower only hits for neutral, but this is a Mega PINSIR. That's going to hit for big damage, and we see the Aqua Tail catch onto Reshiram. The question is, what does my opponent have in the back? My opponent has Mega Charizard X. Farming up with the Reshiram, I cannot make it to a charge move, as unfortunately, Mega Charizard X will KO with the Dragon Claw. In comes the Pinsir. Pinsir makes it to the superpower. This will KO the Mega Charizard X, but I think the Palkia is just too healthy. Palkia farms down, and that's game over. Moving into the next match, we see an interesting lead, Mega Pinsir versus Dialga. Mega Pinsir, of course, can hit for massive super effective damage with superpower, but Mega Pinsir is so glassy that these Dragon Breaths are proving to be a big issue. I go for the X-Scissor bait, and I grab a shield from the Dialga. Dialga is going to grab a shield back with an Iron Head. I will commit a shield and look to farm up to the back-to-back superpowers, farming up with the Pinsir. Opponent safe switches into a quick attack Zacian, and that is very difficult for this team to handle. I'm running Snarl on my Zacian just in case I do happen to see a Giratina lead, but that means that in a mirror going up against quick attack, I am definitely at a disadvantage. I'm going to be firing off the Play Rough, that's going to connect, farming up with my Zacian. Zacian going for the Wild Charge, but losing CMP to my opponent. I'm going to let this through. Opponent did go for the close combat, and now I can send in Reshiram. Since their defense is debuffed, I should be able to farm down, despite the fact that Dragon Breath is double resisted. They go for the close combat. Opponent gives up switch, sending in Dialga, and I have so much energy stored on the Pinsir. Pinsir, big damage, KOing with the superpower. Opponent is going to send in the Zacian, basically just to force me to throw my energy. X-Scissor will connect, not quite able to KO, but Mega Pinsir gets the farm down in the back. It is Mewtwo. Mega Pinsir firing off the X-Scissor. X-Scissor is going to be no-shielded by my opponent, and I think that means my opponent is going to win this game, as my opponent is going to be able to double up on Psy Strikes. So Reshiram not quite able to farm down. Fusion Flare gets the shield, and unfortunately they do have the back-to-back moves here. I commit the shield, hoping my counts are wrong, but my opponent is at the back-to-back. Psy Strike KOs the Reshiram, and that's game over. We see Mega vs. Mega in the next match, Mega Pinsir versus Mega Abomasnow. Mega Pinsir, ever spammy with Fury Cutter, able to strike first with the X-Scissor. X-Scissor is going to grab a shield, my opponent farming up on energy. I farm up, switch, and catch a move onto my Zacian. Let's go. I am able to catch the Weather Ball. My opponent is now going to send in a Chestnut. Chestnut hunting for an Exca, but unfortunately I am not running Excadrill on my team. Chestnut goes for the Frenzy Plant. That is nearly able to KO, but thankfully Zacian is able to hang on. I fire off the Play Rough. That's going to connect. Chestnut looking for the Vine Whip, farm down, and gets it. Chestnut leaves with energy, but Mega Pinsir walls this energy, so I can just send back in the Pinsir, no shield whatever they throw, it's the superpower, and leave with some extra energy. My opponent sends back in Mega Abomasnow. I'm going for the X-Scissor here. X-Scissor is going to be grabbing that final shield from the opponent, and Mega Abomasnow overfarms a bit too much. Superpower will be goodbye to the Abomasnow. In the back, there's Mamoswine, and 2-shield Reshiram is going to be able to seal this game. Opponent can fire off the high horsepower here, but with 2 shields remaining, unfortunately, Reshiram will be able to take this, courtesy of the Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare takes down the Mamoswine, and that's a good game. We've got some spice on the lead in the next match, Mega Pinsir versus Ursaluna. Ursaluna, of course, can generate some pretty significant fast move pressure with Tackle. I build up to the superpower, bait with the X-Scissor, but my opponent calls the bait. That's absolutely awful. I'm going to bank energy on Mega Pinsir and send in Zacian. Zacian, unfortunately, is going to be hit with the high horsepower, and that hits quite hard. I farm up with the Zacian, but I overfarm too much. They make it to a Thunder Punch, and I'm forced to go down a shield. That is not good at all. Go for the Play Rough. Opponent catches on a Palkia, anticipating it would be a close combat, but it's the Play Rough, and Play Rough rocks the Palkia. I do make it to the Wild Charge here. Wild Charge will be lethal. Opponent not wanting to commit to the low health Palkia, and instead, they're just going to take their shield advantage. My opponent in the back, they have Dialga, and Dialga gets the farm down. I'm going to send back in Mega Pinsir. Mega Pinsir farming up, and I'm baiting with the X-Scissor. My opponent has 2 shields remaining. X-Scissor gets the shield. Mega Pinsir winning CMP over Dialga. Mega Pinsir's attack stat is just unreal. And now that I have both shields, I can let this go and hopefully win this game with Reshiram. In comes Reshiram. I just have to watch for the Fusion Flare catch. Farming up with Reshiram. Opponent switches at the perfect time, but thankfully I was looking out for it. I can fire off the Fusion Flare into the Ursaluna. Ursaluna gets KO'd. It's gonna be a race, and Dialga just cannot get the farm down. Reshiram Fusion Flare secures the win. We see a tricky lead in the next match, Mega Pinsir into Mega Blaziken. Now, Mega Blaziken, of course, does have access to either Blast Burn or Blaze Kick. Either one is going to deal massive super effective damage to Mega Pinsir. I connect with the superpower that deals so much damage to Blaziken. Blaziken is going to bank a ton of energy and send in a quick attack Sylveon. Sylveon is going to be met with the Play Rough. Play Rough does deal quite a bit of damage. Zacian farming up. Just before I make it to the Play Rough, Sylveon is going to fire off the Moonblast. Moonblast is going to connect. Zacian farming up a ton of energy and going for another Play Rough. Play Rough will be lethal. Decision time for my opponent. They commit the shield. Zacian dies with the Wild Charge, and that is incredibly unfortunate. I'm now in a bit of an awkward spot here, where my team is pretty weak overall to Fairy types. I send in Reshiram, but the Dragon Breath is double resisted here, so I can't really hit them for a lot of damage. Sylveon baits with a Psyshock, so that ends up being a bait call by me, and I'm going to be firing off the Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare, of course, will KO, but that Blaziken has so much energy in the back. In comes Mamoswine, and here I make a crucial mistake. As soon as I saw the Mamoswine, I should have immediately brought back in the Pinsir, but I stay in with the Reshiram, and that's going to let the Mamoswine get a ton of energy, and this is incredibly bad. I know the Blaziken has a lot of energy as well. Avalanche will KO. In comes the Mega Pinsir. They're going to fire off an Avalanche and grab a shield from Mega Pinsir, and they're going to be bringing back in that Blaziken at any moment. Back in comes the Blaziken. I have to shield everything here. They go for the Blast Burn. They cannot make Blast Burn number 2. Mega Pinsir barely able to outpace. KO with the X-Scissor. It's going to be a race. And Pinsir outpacing the Mamoswine by a turn. Gets to the X-Scissor. Takes down the Mamoswine. And that's a good game. We see a positive lead in the next match, Mega Pinsir into Mewtwo. Mega Pinsir does win all even shielding scenarios versus Mewtwo. I'm farming up and firing off the X-Scissor before they make it to the Psystrike. My opponent commits the shield. They have built up to a potential Ice Beam, so I will respect it with a shield. My opponent just goes for the Psystrike, farming up with the Pinsir. Opponent goes for a catch onto Reshiram. And now I can fire off the superpower. Superpower, big damage onto the Reshiram. I send in my own looking for the farm down, but my opponent with 1 HP remaining is able to make a charge move. Thankfully, just going to be a crunch, so I will be able to survive it. My opponent is pretty close to a move on Mewtwo, or do we see their final Pokemon here? My opponent sends in Dragonite, and I cannot make the Draco Meteor. This is quite unfortunate, as my opponent is going to be able to no-shield that. The good news is, I have Zacian, and Zacian is going to wall Dragonite's energy. Dragonite farming up a ton, goes for the catch onto Mewtwo, and Mewtwo left with energy, and now it's using it. Firing off the Psystrike, I can send back in Mega Pinsir. Mega Pinsir going for the X-Scissor just before Mewtwo makes another move. This, of course, will be lethal. Opponent left with a ton of energy on the Dragonite, and in it comes. Dragonite is going to fire off a Dragon Claw. I commit the shield. I want to try and land a superpower with the Pinsir, but Dragonite just has too much energy. Dragon Claw will KO. The good news is, I have the game won anyway, but I really wanted to see how much damage a resisted superpower would do, because Mega Pinsir's attack stat is absolutely crazy. I'm going for Wild Charge number 2 here. Wild Charge takes down the Dragonite, and that's game over. We've got some Mega Spice in the final game, Mega Pinsir versus Mega Alakazam. These confusions from Mega Alakazam are absolutely shredding Mega Pinsir. Mega Pinsir is going to be firing off the X-Scissor. X-Scissor will get the shield. Mega Pinsir, ever spammy, makes it to another X-Scissor, making the opponent make a difficult decision. They're going to let the Alakazam go. Alakazam did not get to throw a charge move, but it dealt some massive fast move pressure. In comes Nihilego, and this is really bad. Nihilego is a massive core breaker for this team. I go for the superpower. That nearly gets them to half HP, and now I have to send in Reshiram. Reshiram, not going to appreciate the Rock Slide. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this to do as much damage as it did. That does so much damage to the Reshiram. I'm able to make it to the Fusion Flare. This is resisted, but it will be lethal. Fusion Flare KOs. In the back, my opponent has Mewtwo. I would have loved Mega Pinsir to see the Mewtwo. Unfortunately, Mega Pinsir no longer on the field, but the good news is Zacian will be able to close out this game. Zacian is going to fire off the Play Rough. Play Rough is going to get shielded by the Mewtwo. Mewtwo farming up a ton of energy here. Mewtwo going for a Psystrike. I've saved my shields till this point of the game, and I'm finally going to start using them. Shielding Psystrike number 1, and now I can make it to Play Rough number 2. Play Rough is gonna get the Mewtwo low, Zacian with the farm down, and that's game over. And now some final thoughts on Mega Pinsir in the Mega Master League. First off, this thing can output an absurd amount of damage. Like, if you can get it in an energy advantage or shield advantage situation, man, this thing outputs just crazy damage. I will say, due to how frail it is, it does limit it to a certain extent. I would say there are probably other Mega or Primal Pokemon that I'd recommend over Mega Pinsir, but it can be a fun pick for the Mega Master League, and from what I've heard, it's going to be an extremely powerful raid attacker as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.